A very warm welcome tonight to our Sparkling Festival Special Night, again in Champagne. Herzlich willkommen heute Abend zu unserem Spezial-Livestream Champagne, die Cru-Lagen. Tonight we will speak English again because of our hosts. Today we are in Champagne and we will talk about the Champagne Cru, les PLOTS Cru. My name is Gerhild Burkard. I'm organizer of the International Sparkling Festival, which didn't take part last year and this year as well because of the pandemic. So I bring now to you the best sparkling producers at home. So a very welcome tonight to Gerhild Prin from Champagne HEIDSIECK and Valérie Aignan, the Champagne MAILLY. We are sorry, but tonight Sebastian, he couldn't take part, so therefore his assistant Valérie, she will explain us everything about MAILLY Grand Cru, Champagne MAILLY Grand Cru. If you want to chat with us, you have to subscribe to YouTube, and you can have a look and you can ask questions and whatever you want. And we are happy if we are together or if we can talk together. The order of the wines you see on the chat. We start with the Blanc de Blanc, the Charles HEIDSIECK, and then we go to the Brut Reserve de Mailly, and further on to Charles HEIDSIECK again with the Brut Reserve, and then at the end the Blanc de Pinot Noir de Mailly Grand Cru. So welcome. Tonight, Champagne. Champagne, it's an area, you see behind me the map, and we have about 34,000 hectares. And so there is such a diversity, and tonight we have a part when we will talk about our main topic, the cru plots. That means there are areas, villages, which are crus, and our guests will explain it to us. We have in total 4 regions, and here is Reims, where you find this nice cathedral, and then about south of Reims, and today we will meet MAILLY Grand Cru in Mailly. It's in Montagne de Reims, where we find a lot of Pinot Noir. Then a little bit more south, we have Vallée de la Marne, and here is the Côte de Blanc, where you find a lot of Chardonnay. And then about 150 kilometers south of 120 kilometers south to Reims, you have the Côte de Bar, and Charles HEIDSIECK, they have also some wines in Côte de Bar, but Mailly, it's only in MAILLY Grand Cru. So for the audience, I welcome, and we start first with Charles HEIDSIECK because of the order of the champagnes. So Gerhild, welcome, and we have already met each other in live streams, but tonight we are together with 2 and different wineries, and explain us a little bit about Charles HEIDSIECK and the philosophy before we start the tasting.
Thank you, Gerhild, and thanks a lot for the introduction. I'm Gerhild Prin, the cellar master from the winery Charles HEIDSIECK, based in Reims. So just a few words about who we are and where do we come from. Maybe you have heard about HEIDSIECK family because there are still a few wineries that have the HEIDSIECK patronym within their names. So the most famous is very likely Piper HEIDSIECK, which was the very first one to come in Champagne. And as you can guess, HEIDSIECK is just referring to a German family. So they came to Champagne. It was a very friendly visit that became a business. And Charles HEIDSIECK was the grand-nephew from the first member of the HEIDSIECK family that came to Champagne. And in 1851, at the age of 29 years old, he decided to create his own winery that he named, of course, Charles HEIDSIECK. So within the DNA and the winemaking philosophy, we have in mind the use of reserve wine as a true element of our DNA. Typically in the non-vintage, like the Brut Reserve, so the second wine we'll be testing from Charles, we are approaching now 50% of reserve, which is really extremely high compared to what you can observe in Champagne. And even on a non-vintage, like the Blanc de Blanc non-vintage, which is supposed to really convey and capture freshness and this kind of tension and acidity you can pretend to get from the Chardonnay, we also use a significant amount of reserve, like 25% of reserve.
About the reserve wines, we will talk later, because perhaps we start with the crus, because you have a lot of crus in your champagne, and we explain all the different champagnes later when we taste them. But your first philosophy is the reserve wines and the cru plots, correct?
Yes, correct, exactly. And we totally consider that a significant amount of crus is bringing complexity, is bringing more sophistication to the wines. So typically we use and involve about 50 different crus from all over the different regions that Gerhild has shown on the map. Typically we are going to use in our wines, mostly wines from the Marne. So typically from the Montagne de Reims, the Montagne de Reims, the Côte des Blancs, and the Val de la Marne. But as you said, Gerhild, we also involve some wines from the Côte des Bars, especially for the rosé, like the red wines from L'Hérissé, which is very exotic and distinctive. Or even in our Blanc de Blanc, we use some Chardonnay from Monguit, which is a unique place in Champagne as well. And of course, we are making quite sophisticated and complex blends. It takes months and months to really achieve the making of a blend. I'm currently working on that task at the moment, and I need about a month to achieve all the different blends, meaning at the end of the day, it will be like 4 to 5 months of work. Just
okay. If we start now talking about the work, so you have a part of your own wineries and you buy some grapes. Perhaps you explain us a little bit the system about your own vineyards and how do you work?
So if we look at what is the situation within Champagne, the houses of Champagne, typically, to make things simple, they own 10% of the vineyards, 10% of the land. And as a result, they need to buy 90% of their grapes to set up their blend. It's exactly the case of HEIDSIECK. We own 10% of our vineyards, and we need to buy 90% of our grapes. In my point of view, it's a luck, and we are lucky to have that situation, meaning that we get access to a lot of diversity of grapes because we are not meaning prisoner of our own only vineyards, because we can get access to many different type of profile of grapes due to the different profile you will find in different crus.
So we are talking about 3 different grape varieties. We already mentioned Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. And there are some others, but these are so rare, but you only work with these 3 grapes. And Champagne MAILLY Grand Cru, they only work with 2 grapes because the wines the grapes are really coming up around the Mailly. Valérie, she will explain us later. And you are only working with Chardonnay and Pinot. If we are going further to the cellar, Cyril, how do you work in the cellar? So the pressing, and do you work only in stainless steel, or because you have a lot of reserve wine?
So we work with both. Oops, can you hear me well? Okay.
Yeah.
So we work with both stainless steel tanks for most of what we are doing, over 90%. And since recently, we have reintroduced the use of oak barrels. The idea is not to really get the oakiness or this kind of vanilla profile from new oak, but just to try to concentrate the advantages from oak barrels that you will not get through a stainless steel tank. So we are going to get a bit more texture. We'll get this kind of creamy, buttery finish with some toasted flavors, but it has to be gentle toast. It should not be something that is just hurting your face when you smell something like brand new oak or vanilla. So we have this notion of trying to get the best of both worlds, stainless steel for most of what we are doing, and especially for the aging of the reserve wines. And for the fresh wines, the wine from the fresh harvest, for a small fraction, they go through oak aging and oak vinification.
Okay.
We do full malolactic. Let's say 95% of our wine go through malolactic, and in some rare cases, like 5%, I decide to stop or to avoid the malolactic fermentation because I detect a potential of aging that might go even further if the malo is not implemented.
Concerning malolactic fermentation, we will talk a little bit later because there are not only professionals on the stream and sometimes they don't know, but I think now it's time to have an aperitif because it's 7 o'clock and a little bit more, and people are sitting at home. I think they have some food on their table and they want to say cheers with us. And I show you the first bottle we will taste. And this is HEIDSIECK Blanc de Blanc. And here you can see it. And we will taste it, and then we talk about how do you work with this wine, because a Blanc de, what does it mean, a Blanc de Blanc? And it's quite very nice, I think, to start with a Chardonnay. So Valérie, we say cheers with your wine as well. You have something in the glass so that we can say cheers. Yeah.
I will.
Cheers.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Yeah, one moment. She will put something in her glass. I think this is a nice evening, and it's becoming spring, and I have the impression that we will have some spring in our class tonight. So cheers to everyone tonight. Welcome again. And Cyril, tell us what we have in our glass.
So we have a Blanc de Blanc. So Blanc de Blanc means that it's a wine that is only made from white grapes. So at the opposite of black grapes. So the most famous white grapes in Champagne is the Chardonnay by very, very, very far. You may use a Pinot Blanc or Pinot Gris, but it's very, very marginal. So it's a pure Chardonnay. And in that case, we are going to source most of the grapes in the very famous Côte des Blancs. That's the region that is in the southern part of Épernay. So for over 50%, we are going to have some Chardonnay from the Côte des Blancs, especially from Vertu and Auger. So Auger is quite interesting because it's going to bring a bit of flesh and body and extra richness to the wines. Vertu is more classic on this kind of tight tension and acidity. Then we are going to involve some Chardonnay from the Côte de Sézanne, a little bit southern than the Côte des Blancs, and one of the most southern village for Chardonnay, which is Mongueux. So it's a pure Chardonnay. So Vertu is part of the component, but not only. The major components are coming from 5 different crus. So Vertu, Auger in the Côte des Blancs, Côte de Sézanne, and yet Mongueux and Villers-Marmery. In that case, we are going to use reserve wines up to 25% of reserve in order to really convey a bit more structure, body, texture. Because as you know, Blanc de Blanc are known to be very tight on the acidity, on the freshness. And we wanted that vintage to be like that. But at Charles, we also have a huge DNA behind the texture, behind this kind of creaminess, butteriness that is part of the style and signature. So we wanted to have those 2 facets within our Blanc de Blanc. Tension, freshness, of course, which is kind of common to many Blanc de Blanc, but we wanted to have it with the Chardonnay style in order to have an extra texture and body.
Okay, so if we smell it, I think it has this special smell of Chardonnay and like citrus, but citrus zests as well, and very creaminess and a little bit butter. So,
Yeah,
but you can explain your own wine perhaps better than me.
And we want exactly what to have what you described, because that's the two facets I was describing. We want this kind of citrusy, zesty, lemony profile, which is something you expect. And that's why we have put the Chardonnay Blanc de Blanc at the first wine for the testing, because that's the one that is like kind of cleaning your palate and prepare maybe your palate for the next wines as well. But we wanted to have this kind of two different facets, freshness and also texture and body. And when you test it, you have this kind of creamy, buttery, a little bit of roasted, toasted fruits on the backside, which means that this champagne is going to be perfect as an aperitif, but you might also use it with a starter, kind of a seafood-based starter. It works perfectly as a pairing.
Yeah, every time I say to people, please taste it, use it for a menu and taste it. So it's very nice that you have explained as what we can combine with it. Today we haven't heard Valérie from Champagne, Champagne MAILLY GRAND CRU. We will come back later to you, Cyril, because we have two wineries today. To repeat it again, it's HEIDSIECK and Champagne MAILLY GRAND CRU. And Valérie, tell us a bit. We have very often in your winery, I know these wines, and you are in MAILLY GRAND CRU. Explain us a little bit about the history of your cooperative, because it's a very small cooperative.
Exactly. So we have a younger history compared to HEIDSIECK. First of all, what's important about us is that we are located in the village of Mailly, which is in the Montagne de Reims, not very far from Reims. It's roughly 13 kilometers away from Reims. And it's a very tiny village. It's 700 people, and it's also a tiny viticultural area, roughly 230 hectares. The company was founded in 1929 by 25 growers. And the story behind that is that the time was very difficult. It was the economic crisis, and they had difficulty to sell their grape. And they all belonged to the same musical company. And so they went together and decided, okay, let's go together, create a company. We are going first to make some still wine, and we are going to sell it to the big house and be stronger like that. It didn't work because the big houses at that time didn't want to buy the wine. So they say, okay, let's go all the way and let's make our own champagne. So they built everything from scratch, built a house where we are right now. It has been modified, but it's still the same location. And most of all, I mean, they bought a press machine, and also what they did is build our cellar. So it's quite a unique story for us, because the 25 members said, okay, they didn't have any place to store, so they needed to dig the cellar. So they did that by hand. And the deal was, when you belong to the company and you had 1 hectare, you owed 10 days of work to the company to dig the cellar. And it took them 30 years to create the 1 kilometer cellar that we still use to store our wine. So for us, it's a very strong history, and it's really part of our DNA. Especially because we still work with the same family. So the 25 original members had families, the vineyard was spread among them, and the same 25 family are still there. The number of growers a bit expanded because of succession, but it's still the same people. And very soon, the decision was made to focus only on Mailly. So everything we do come from the village and from our growers. And the idea is to bring the most of what our terroir is giving us. Mailly is a bit special because
Mailly,
and
in one moment. You are here in Mailly, in Montagne de Reims.
Exactly.
And in our first part, we already explained that in Mailly, we found
So it's mostly Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir, it's very, you have a part of Chardonnay as well. So 75% is Pinot Noir.
75% Pinot Noir and 25% Chardonnay. And also what is special about Mailly is that, so in Champagne, we have 17 Grand Cru. and MAILLY is one of these 17 Grand Cru. So all the champagne we make are actually Grand Cru because all the vines are from MAILLY. And in total, with our growers, we manage 75 hectares. So we are fairly small company, and we make 500,000 bottles. So it's
you are very, very small cooperative.
Exactly.
And what I find very interesting is that you are still with the same families. There is some heritages, but you really you work together with the families. So you have these growers as well. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a really nice story, and for me, very, very interesting. If we are just going in the vineyards, because you have 35 lieux-dits.
Yeah, so the village of MAILLY is divided in 35 lieux-dits. And
perhaps you can explain a little bit to the audience, what is it, a lieu-dit?
It's a name plot in the village. So, for example, the one just behind where we are is called Derrière la Coopérative, and we have other names like that which have been separated. And our growers have got plots among these 35 lieux-dits. The 35 lieux-dits have different characteristics. They have different sun exposure, even if most of our plantations are exposed west, which is one of the characteristics, north or west. And the soil is also a little bit different. Some are closer to the forest, some are a little bit closer to Reims in a sense, flatter on slope, it depends.
Okay, so I think this is very interesting because in this lieu-dit, you have in total 600 different smaller plots. And so this is very exceptional as well.
It's because also we work with 80 growers, so they have got plots everywhere and each grower has got different plots. But for us, the focus is not on the plot of the grower, but on the lieu-dit. So you can speak about that later, but we try to focus on the lieu-dit and to know them better and to bring the best of this lieu-dit.
Yeah. So I think we have to taste something of you to get an impression what you are doing. And I haven't opened a bottle today. I haven't opened the other bottle, but not in front of the screen. So I think it's very nice to say cheers and to open a bottle at this evening. And we will starting with the Brut Reserve Grand Cru, Champagne MAILLY Grand Cru.
So the blend is 75 Pinot Noir and 25 Chardonnay. So it's correspond to what we have in our vineyards. It's also...
I love this sound. You hear this sound, and it's still bubbling.
And it's also made with 40% of reserve wine. And you will see while tasting, I mean, the Pinot Noir of MAILLY has got a different expression to what Pinot Noir normally has. So you will find less red fruit or red berry, but much more aroma of white flower, a little bit citrusy aroma, spicy aroma. And on the palate, the characteristic of MAILLY is the minerality and the salinity. And it's due to our being north, and also to our soil, which is made of chalk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you say, it's very flowering. It's not really these red fruits, and
that's what.
And it's toasty aromas as well. I think because of the aromas and a little bit brioche. Mm-hmm. And
still very fresh, very lively. So same a little bit was what Gerhild said. It's perfect for an aperitif, but also it works very well with starter. And I agree with you. I mean, champagne can be paired all along the meal, and we have to get used to that. It's maybe a bit easier when you're in Champagne because you have access to a lot of champagne, but it can really pairs well, and it's matched very well with food.
Yeah, I think it's very nice. You have this, it's totally different to the Chardonnay because you really remark the Pinot, mm-hmm. and you have not really tannins, but it's a little bit stronger. And Gerhild, you told us that you are working with Montagne de Reims as well for the Chardonnay. And And what is the difference between Mailly and Villa-Marmarie concerning the Chardonnay? Because they are really next to each other. Mailly is about here, Villa-Marmarie is here, so they are really not far. And what is the difference between this kind of Chardonnay?
In my opinion, the difference is very linked to the not to the soil and subsoil, which could be in a way similar. The main difference will be linked to the exposure to the sun. In Villa-Marmarie, you are really full east exposure, whereas in Mailly, you are more on a northern exposure. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you will have some Chardonnay that will be very citrusy, very lemony in Villa-Marmarie, and in the terroir from Mailly, it will be more chalky. You will have this kind of smokiness, chalkiness that is quite significantly different from Villa-Marmarie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, can you explain a little bit about the soil, Valerie, in Mailly?
It's a bit the same as what Gerhild said, and the same as in all over in Champagne. So it's a lot of chalk, but what really makes a difference, and that's why also we have done study about that. It's what Gerhild said, the exposure, and what we found out is that for us, most of our vineyard was more on the north, facing north. But by studying them more closely, what we have found out is that most of them also are very west, and mostly northwest. Mm-hmm. And so it brings the sun at the end of the day, and that's what's going to make the difference of the light and the intensity of the sun.
Yeah. This is what I feel, because it's the north. It's good now because of the climate change, I think. You're north-facing. Yeah.
And it was also helpful this month, because maybe some of you know, but we had a lot of frost in France, which were very bad for all the vineyards. Yeah. And in Mailly, we were lucky because we have Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir is a late budding. And also because we are, the climate is a bit cooler, the vegetation was not as advanced, so we lost less, so it protected us in a way. But we are also most of the time the latest to start the harvest, because our grapes need more time to ripen because of the northern exposure.
Yeah. If we are coming back now, we come later to Mailly Grand Cru again, and if we are coming back now to HEIDSIECK with the second wine we will taste, and it's also a Brut Reserve.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So explain us about the degorgement date, your analysis on the back label, and because this is very interesting as well. So we will taste now the Brut Reserve from HEIDSIECK, but first we get the history about this wine, or the story, not the history, but the story.
So we were kind of a pioneer when we decided in the late 80s to provide the information about the date of cellaring, meaning for the non-vintage, that was a kind of a new innovation, since at the time you could only know which year was based only on the vintages, because on the vintages you have to put the year, because that's the year of the harvest for the vintages. In the case of non-vintage, depending on the maker, it can be something very young or something very old. And that's the reason why HEIDSIECK decided to provide that information. At the first time, they put it on the front label, which was in some way a bit confusing. So that's why they stopped it. It was called the mise en cave. And you had the mise en cave 1992, for instance, meaning it was cellared in 92. So the main base was the previous year, like 91. Nowadays, we still put that information on the back label. So you can see on the back label that this wine was cellared in 2017. So it means that the main base year is 2016. Yeah. And thanks to that, you can now find some HEIDSIECK fans that are making vertical testing of non-vintage, which was something that was normally only for vintages. And thanks to that, people, they really also enjoy and they like to store and to put aside some bottles, because they have discovered the beauty of aging non-vintage. Because to me, there is no hierarchy between non-vintage and vintages. It's different profile, different style, and different expressions. And if you like the non-vintage style, if you age it, you will discover some facet that you might not imagine when drinking it too young. And that's the idea behind putting the base year on the back label of our wines.
So we have a cuvée and of this wine, and you have a big part of reserve wine. So it's 40%.
No, it's really much more. We are approaching like 50% of reserve.
50. Okay.
So we have been for many years working with 40% of reserve, and since I've joined a winery, we are now over 50% of reserve. Technically, in detail, in this one, we have 46% of reserve wines, and more than just to talk about the quantity, what is interesting is to talk about what kind of reserve do we use, and we use kind of old reserve wines, and you can see just looking at the color. The color is quite gold, dark gold, yeah, which means it's quite spectacular for a non-vintage, which are, for most of them, much more lighter in terms of color. And on the nose, you will have this kind of toasted profile, this kind of roasted.
Yep, this nutty, roasted nuts. And if we come back to our topic, cru plots, which crus are inside, and perhaps you explain a little bit, because if you are talking about crus, they started it in 1911. And explain us little bit the history of the crus, and then later is coming up, and we give us an exchange.
Yeah, in 1911 there was a crisis in Champagne that was due to different factors, viticulture like the phylloxera, but also business factors. And so the vignerons were complaining that they couldn't get the right price for their grapes. And they organized a syndicate to be stronger versus the buyers of grapes, so the houses of Champagne. And they created a cru scale in order to guarantee a minimum income for every grape sellers. And step by step, this cru scale has been linked to the quality. So the houses, they were purchasing higher price this village like Ailly or Ménil-sur-Oger, etc. And step by step, they created a scale, and each and every cru village in Champagne has been ranked among that scale. At the beginning, it was starting at 60%, going up to 100. And nowadays, it's the bottom level is 80% to go up to 100%. So you have three categories. You have the Grand Cru, they are 100%. Then you have the Premier Cru from 90 up to 99. And you have the other crus, regular crus, that are below 90%. So
this
90%,
was the start. This was the start. So, but now the label, they changed. And so it's not, the villages are still crus, and it's not because the price is so high.
Yes, and it's different from Burgundy. In Burgundy, within the same village, you can have village, you have Premier Cru and Grand Cru. In Champagne, that's the entire village that is qualified for the same classification. My birth village, for instance, which is Ailly, is Grand Cru. Wherever you are within that village, you will get the ranking Grand Cru. And we know also that those Grand Crus, they are challenged. But the only thing you know is on a long-term period, the cru scale is right. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, for some reasons, and climatic change is a key element in terms of judging the quality of the grapes. So you have some regular crus or Premier Cru that tends to challenge the Grand Crus. It can be true, but on the long-term period, I do consider that the cru scale is pretty well precise.
No, so you have a village and not a one plot, the cru classification. So just we haven't really tasted it, and we talk about the crus, and we have to know how many crus are inside. But first, I have to taste it, and So if there are now, the audience is really back now, so you can chat with us, you can ask questions, or you can give comments and about the wines. And I think it will be very interested. When we stopped our small life today, I think at home you have already tasted the wines and you have had fun. So for me, it's really this nuttiness and it's very, but it's very fine and delicate. Some in German we say nougat as well, and
yeah, correct.
Yeah. So explain us.
So we're going to work with 50 crus. So which means it's already a very severe selection. If you think about 320 crus in Champagne, using only 50 of them is only using 15% of what is available in Champagne. And so we have some crus that are really well capturing the style of Charles. If I name just one per varietal, Haï or Ambonnet are very typical from what we want to convey when we talk about Pinot Noir. Vertu or even Auger are some very classical Chardonnay we like to implement in our brut, or a cru like Verneuil or Ville d'Aumange are, for the Meunier, are two crus that are really matching well our needs. And apart from just those crus, of course, we are looking for the crus that are in the surroundings of those crus, because usually you have some microclimate, and if you go in the surroundings of those crus that are really matching your needs, you are going to find variations, nuances from what you are looking for at the beginning. So altogether, we work with like 50 different crus, meaning at the end of the day, it could be somehow 300 different plots.
If you want to combine something with this kind of champagne, because it's full-bodied, it's very creamy, and the palate. So what do you suggest to the audience to combine with food?
So I still like it as an aperitif, even if it's a kind of rich profile for an aperitif. And when using it for aperitif, I like to serve cheese, because the cheese has this kind of milky, creamy profile that grows pretty well, and you can have also the freshness, the acidity. I like to pair it with pecorino or Parmesan cheese, for instance.
Yeah, that's great. I have some champignons tonight, some creamy champignons with potatoes. I think this we can combine very well as food. So now we are coming back to Valérie. Explain us now the next wine, because we have a Plan de Pinot Noir. It's now the Plan de Pinot Noir of your winery. So I think this is the DNA, because it's 100%. 100%. Yeah.
It really shows what we are about and what we are trying to do. So first is Pinot Noir. It's a very important wine for us. It's really what we think represents us the most. So it's Pinot Noir, but it's the first wine also, if you look at the back label, where we are also explaining what we are doing in a very precise way. So we have created a range called Composition Parcellaire, and the idea of this range is to bring forward our 35 named plots. So when we started to do this wine, we wanted to first put Pinot Noir in front, and then also to show people what different parcel can do in one village. So we have done a lot of work in the vineyards. We just got some sustainable viticulture certification to help us to express much more what the grapes can give us. And also in the cellar, we have in the early 2000s, bought some small tanks, which allows us to vinify by parcel. And then when we do the blending, we are going to have many parcels that we can blend together and be much more precise. And same on the label, we want to express what we are doing. So same as what Cyril was explaining, we have put the base year, which in the one you're drinking today is 2017. And we explain how much reserve wine we add, the part which was in oak, the part which wasn't in oak, if there is some part which have done malolactic, some not. So it's really playing. And when it was disgorged, to be then put on the market.
Mm-hmm. So we haven't really talked about how do you work in the cellar, because I know you work in barrels as well. In Cyril, he's not really working in barrels, but only with a very small part. And but you are really working in barrels or big foeder. And so explain us a little bit what is
the first difference we have is when we do the pressing, we are going to take as cuvée a little bit less. So cuvée is what in Champagne is considered the best. A little bit less that what we are allowed, to be even more stricter on the selection of juice we are making. And then depending on what we taste when the pressing is done, the wine is either going to go into stainless steel tank, small tanks or big tanks. And we also are going to work with our reserve wine the same way. So some will be in small tanks, playing around. Then also we will decide if we do malolactic or not. We mostly do the malolactic fermentation, but we also experiment with non-malolactic wine.
If I smell in this wine, I say wine because Champagne is wine as well, so you have a part of fruitiness, but of ripened fruitiness, and you have nuts as well. Yes, and if you go on the
and also on the palate, we'll see it's a fuller wine, because I mean the Pinot Noir is really expressing itself. So there were shoulders, but still you will find what is for me the characteristic of maize, this salinity and this minerality that is carrying the wine through, and also will help the wine to age better.
I think you have really this salinity, this saltiness on the palate, and it's full-bodied. It's totally different to HEIDSIECK again. So I think we have a good combination, because we have these crus. We work with you and HEIDSIECK. You are working with reserve wines. And so this is great that we can combine, or that we compare different wines and different styles as well. But it's very, very fresh. And the base year of this year is
2017.
The base year?
2017. And same as because Gerhild is doing the same as we are. We are also leaving the wine longer, only that's what the appellation is allowing us. So in Champagne, for non-vintage wine, you have to have a minimum of 15 months only. With this wine, we waited for 3 years. So same, it gives time to the interaction between the wine and the lees and all different aromas to develop, and also to get finer bubbles. And that's also something which is important for us. We always try to have a little bit finer bubbles, so a bit less pressure to have the bubble a bit more delicate.
Okay. And what is the minimum in HEIDSIECK for you? It's not 15 months, but it's what is the minimum for you?
Obviously not. The base where we are testing has just arrived. It's a 16 non-vintage base. So meaning we are going further 4 years.
So really very long, and I think this is the taste, and you have these fine bubbles as well, and this preciseness, and so I think this is very, very good. I know people have bought some wines as well. They bought the millésime, the Champagne millésime. We will talk about it, and we start with HEIDSIECK again with the 2012. So Cyril, in the 2012 there are no reserve wines, because it's a vintage wine.
Of course not.
And
Yes.
so this is very important, because sometimes people ask me, oh, what are the reserve wines inside? And said, oh, no, okay, there are no reserve wines, because reserve wines, they are older wines, and they are in barrels or in tanks, in stainless steel tanks, and they are waiting for the plants. And explain us a little bit, because we have 2 wines of 2012. Because why do you have decided to make a 2012? Because vintage, it's not every year as good as well. So, Cyril.
So a vintage to me is a gift from Mother Nature, because it has to be as close as possible to perfection, because you have no means of correcting anything, since you can only rely on the grapes from one single harvest. So they have to be the most perfect one can imagine. Yet you have no obligation to make a vintage every year. It's your decision. It's Maï's decision. It's anybody's decision. If you like it, you do it. If you don't like it, you have no pressure to do it. What's happening when we say we make a vintage, we are not going to make the entire production from one single harvest to become a vintage. We are going to just select a small fraction of the grapes to enter into a vintage blend. And that selection is based on the aging potential. This kind of, as far as Charles is concerned, we are really judging the potential of aging for the vintage, and this kind of texture, body, opulence, that is a key element we want to capture in our vintage. So when we test all the wines, very early in the testings, we detect some components that might be eligible for vintages, and we need just 5 or 6% of them, because that's roughly the production of vintage in the case we make a vintage in 1 year. So
in this one question, Cyril. So
yes.
What are the grapes inside, and how many crus and premier crus are inside? Because I think this is very interesting for our topic today.
So we use 60% Pinot Noir, 40% Chardonnay, and we are going to use a dozen of crus only. So something very, very restrictive in terms of cru. And we have only Grand Cru and Premier Cru, but mostly because those elements are really those ones that are capable to go very, very far in terms of aging. And the wine has just been released this year, 2012. And I really predict another 15 years of aging potential for that wine. So if you don't have those components at the beginning, there is no option that wine will go that far away.
Okay. If we are coming to MAILLY Grand CRU, it's a 2012 as well. Yes. It's an extra brut. And explain us why do we have chosen 2012, and what is why this year, and
So in our range, we have quite a few of vintage wine, because we make roughly 8 wine altogether, and 4 of them are vintaged. But we don't vintage them all the years. So some cuvées are vintage 1 year, some cuvées are not vintage another year. 2012 for nous are exceptional, because we have 2 different styles. So one style where we make vintage wine when the wine is fuller, much more sun, stronger, and another one which is much more delicate. And in 2012 we could make both of them, so it's really for us the perfect vintage. In this bottle we have their normal blend. So what MAILLY is about, 75% Pinot Noir and 25% Chardonnay. And it's made in the same spirit as what you have with the Blanc de Pinot Noir, because it's also cuvée parcellaire. So same idea, we explain where the grapes come from and how we have worked on that. And I agree with Cyril. It is a vintage that has a potential to last long, and also because you have all the components from the grapes, the structure, the body, but also the acidity, which will help it to age and carry it a long time.
Mhm. If we are just looking, we are nearly coming to the end because we have had this interruption, but nevertheless, if we are just have a look, we have talking about the crus, about the reserve wines, because both of you are using this kind of wines. And if we are looking to sustainability, and Gerhild, what is the aim of HEIDSIECK, and then the aim of MAILLY? Gerhild.
So in our case, we are fully certified for our own vineyards. So meaning we talk about almost like 100 hectares that are fully certified with the highest grade. And we, of course, invite all our partners that are supplying the grapes to us to do exactly the same thing. And technically, we need another 5 or 6 years to reach that goal, because we have now reached about half of that goal for the grapes that we don't produce by ourselves, but the grapes that are supplied by our partners and grape suppliers.
Okay, Valérie.
So same for me, it's a very important topic. So we decided a few years ago to go fully into sustainability, so AG and VDC. But as I explained before, I mean, we are a co-op, and the group for us is very important. So the target for us was to do it as a group and to move everybody all together. So 3 years ago, we hired somebody to help the growers through that, and also we took all the cost of the certification. And this year, it's a very big moment, an important moment for us, because we are fully certified. So all our growers are certified. And we are, I think, the first co-op in Champagne to achieve that, to be certified, an entire group, and we have done a group certification. So we celebrate that, and we want to continue in that direction. So going even further, but same, we want to do it as a group. So we need to make sure everybody is motivated and on board. But it's an important topic.
Yeah. So it's perhaps for the audience, they didn't know that you have different labels. You have a France label, HB, that means these are the basics, and then a special Champagne Durable, that means that is on top on it, and then you become later organic. And I think this is a good approach concerning demand of the customers. So when we come now the end, one question, because in 2020 we have heard a lot of in the last weeks in 2021 we have heard a lot about the frosts in every area in France. Gerhild, what happens in Champagne with your wines, and Valérie as well for MAILLY?
So in Champagne, I would say that the most earlier grapes have been impacted. So mostly the Chardonnay and mostly the Pinot Noir from the very southern part of Champagne. So the Côte des Bar very impacted for the Pinot Noir, and the Côte des Blancs and Côte de Sézanne once more very impacted for the Chardonnay. Yet that's not the end of the game, and sadly it's not a game, because we had still some very cold temperature this week. So we'll know a bit more in another 2-3 weeks. But currently, in fact, we can really imagine that we'll have lost between 25 to 30% of the potential of that harvest due to frost.
It's hard. In MAILLY, what happens in MAILLY?
Yeah, same story for us. The thing is, MAILLY is a bit, means more in the north, so the vegetation is always a bit later. So we were at the beginning a bit less impacted, and also because we have less Chardonnay, and Chardonnay was very badly hit because it birds earlier. What Gerhild says is exactly right. It's still very cold in Champagne. We had frost early this week. So, I mean, the game is not finished, and same, it's not a game. So we just wait. I mean, we have this saying in France about, I don't know if you've heard, the sand glass, so the ice sand, which are next week.
Yeah.
So we keep our finger crossed until then. The other problem we have also, and that's why it's difficult to know right now, is that the frost had an effect, but also the last 2 years where we had a lot of heat and a lack of water put a lot of stress on the vine. And what we are finding right now is that some of the buds are not opening just because they don't have the power to do that. So it's going to be difficult to say exactly right now because it's too early. But the same average as Gerhild is between 25 and 30% that are lost.
Okay, so these are the problems, but at least we won't have problems tonight because we have champagne in our glass. And I think this is the most important thing for tonight, and to celebrate the certification of MAILLY, and to celebrate some special moments as well. And I really like to say thank you to you. One last word, Gerhild, tonight for this meeting.
I would like to remain very optimistic, even if we have had some frost. 2012, the one we have just in front of us, have been just a nightmare in terms of viticulture. And at the end of the day, we had a gift from Mother Nature. So let's be optimistic.
Exactly.
Okay, Valérie.
Life is going to start again to be a bit more normal, so we have to celebrate, and champagne is just the perfect thing to do that. So let's drink.
Yes. I think as well, because restaurants will open, and I think we will have a nice summer, and the pandemic will getting over. And I say thank you very much to you, to Champagne. It was a great moment for us, for the audience as well, and for me to join you. And hopefully that we will see us analog in Champagne, but perhaps at the end of the year. So cheers. Oh, my glass is nearly empty. Cheers to everyone, and to the audience, and see you hopefully soon analog, and the audience at home, stay tuned, and have a nice evening with these great champagnes, and you've got all the information about the growers. Thank you very much. Bye bye, and see you. Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.